They say war is hell, but what's really strange is that even in hell, there are rules. It's a huge paradox, isn't it? How can the most chaotic, destructive thing humans do have a code of conduct? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to dive into. We're going to explore those rules and figure out what separates an act of war from an actual war crime. We've all heard that old saying, right? All is fair in love and war. Well, I'm here to tell you, when it comes to war, that's just not true at all. There are literal rules in place, things you just can't do. Acts, weapons, even entire strategies that have been deemed way too inhumane for combat. So the big question is, where did we draw these lines, and how? Okay, so let's go way back. The term war crime itself, it's actually pretty new. It only really popped up in the 1800s. But the idea that there should be rules, some kind of code in warfare, oh, that's ancient. We're talking thousands of years old. And honestly, it's the foundation for every single rule we have on the books today. Let's travel back in time, all the way to 600 BCE in ancient India. They had these texts that laid out a code for what they called righteous warfare. And the rules were incredibly specific. They said fights had to be equal, so you'd only see chariots fighting other chariots. You weren't allowed to attack soldiers who were sleeping, running away, or trying to surrender. And this is so important, it was absolutely forbidden to harm unarmed women, children, or the elderly. Then you've got ancient China, around the 5th century BCE. Their code said you couldn't attack an enemy that wasn't ready. Basically, no sneak attacks. But here's what's really fascinating. You had thinkers like Sun Tzu, right? He was all about strategy over just pure brutality. His whole thing about focusing on taking out the leaders, it wasn't really a plea for mercy, it was just smart strategy, a way to win without causing a ton of unnecessary destruction. And then there were the ancient Greeks. They didn't really write it all down. It was more like a set of unwritten customs, a kind of gentleman's agreement. You had to formally declare war, and you weren't supposed to mutilate the bodies of your enemies. But, and this is a big but, there was a catch. These rules, they only applied when Greek city-states were fighting each other. If they were up against anyone they considered barbarians, well, all bets were off. So for literally thousands of years, this is how it was. Just customs, informal agreements. But then, everything changed. The year was 1863. And so the very first time, these kinds of rules were actually written down and made into official binding law. This was a complete game changer. And the man who made it happen? His name was Francis Liber. He was a German-American academic, but he wasn't just some guy in an ivory tower. He had seen the absolute horrors of war firsthand. He fought in the Napoleonic Wars and the Greek War of Independence. So this unique mix of military, legal, and political experience, it made him the perfect person to write this new rulebook. And what he came up with was called the Liber Code. It was actually commissioned by Abraham Lincoln's government, and it became the official military law for the Union Army during the American Civil War. Think about that. For the very first time in modern history, an entire army had an official rulebook telling them how to behave in the middle of a battle. The code had 157 articles in total, but the real heart of it, the core idea, was simple. No cruelty for the sake of being cruel. You could kill an enemy, sure, that's war, but you couldn't do it in a way that was intentionally torturous. It explicitly outlawed things like torture, using poison, and of course, assaulting or murdering civilians. So the Liber Code started out pretty small, right? Just one army in one war. But its influence, it was massive. It basically became the blueprint, the foundation for creating a global standard for how to behave during wartime. You can actually see how it all unfolded. The Liber Code in 1863, it directly influenced the very first Geneva Convention just 1 year later. Then that led to the Hague Conventions around the turn of the century, and all of that history leads us right to the modern Geneva Conventions of 1949, which are basically the bedrock of all international law on war today. So the Hague Conventions, they're the ones that really took Liber's principles and made them international. They backed up his core ideas, but also added some important new rules. For example, they banned certain types of bullets, the ones designed to expand or flatten inside the body, and they made it illegal to loot occupied towns. And then came the big one. After the absolute devastation of World War II, the world came together to create the Geneva Conventions of 1949. And these are the heart of everything we're talking about today. Their entire purpose, their sole mission, is to protect the victims of war.
Okay, so with all of that history under our belts, from ancient India to 1949, we can finally put together a clear list. What today actually counts as a major war crime?
All right, first things first, we need to get our heads around a really important legal term, protected person. This is the key to understanding everything. These are the people the laws are specifically designed to shield. And it's not just civilians. It also includes prisoners of war, wounded or sick soldiers, and even neutral folks like medics and peacekeepers. A huge number of war crimes are defined by what you do to this group of people. Now, this is where it gets really interesting. We're not just talking about defining the crimes anymore. We're talking about punishing them. The Nuremberg Principles, which came out of the trials after World War II, were created to make sure criminals are actually held accountable. They make two things crystal clear. International law trumps national law, and your job title doesn't protect you. Even being a head of state offers zero protection from punishment. So when you put it all together, what do you get? Well, under modern law, a war crime includes things like willfully killing a protected person, torture, or any other kind of inhumane treatment. It also means taking hostages, denying a prisoner their right to a fair trial, or, and this is a big one, forcing civilians to act as human shields. And the rules don't just cover who you can't attack, they also cover how you fight. It's a war crime to intentionally starve civilians as a tactic. It's a war crime to use banned weapons like poison gas. And it's a war crime to attack things like cultural sites, undefended towns, or humanitarian peacekeeping missions. You know, if you look at all of this, there's a common thread that connects every single rule from ancient India all the way to modern Geneva. The goal has always been the same, to stop unnecessary suffering and to protect the people who aren't part of the fight. It's a pretty grim silver lining, I guess. But it's this basic acknowledgement that, look, war might happen, but the amount of suffering it causes, that's something we can and absolutely must try to control. And all of this brings us to one final, really crucial question. We have thousands of years of customs. We have over 150 years of written down international law, all designed to limit how brutal war can be. So why is holding people who break these rules accountable still one of the single greatest challenges we face today?